Hey Ben, good to see you. What time is it there where you are in
Oh,
London?
it's 3 p.m. and it's 30 degrees Celsius.
Oh, nice. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit, why don't we, really quick, just to let everybody know you and your background. Ben is, we've got people here from every space of design. And for me, I think of service design as still one of the newer categories of design, right? We've got architecture, fashion, branding, marketing. These are historical categories that are creative, but we've got spaces like user experience that's become so popular. And service design, to me, is still one of those newer pioneering spaces. And I love that we're able, because we have this virtual conference, we've been able to have Ben join us on this design summit. Ben, can you talk to us about Livework and how you've built service design in London and really what it's like to lead service design around the world?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks, Angela. Hi, everybody. So, yeah, you're right. I think service design is still one of the younger disciplines, and I feel like a bit of an old man of it because we started out Livework in 2001, and our initial our initial project was to explore whether service design was a thing.
Yeah.
There were three of us. We'd been working for larger um, digital agencies and kind of had a feeling that there was something else missing in what we were doing. The guys that I worked with were trained as product or industrial designers, but they weren't seeing much industrial design in the work they were doing, and we felt that the work we were doing in digital was kind of one piece of a bigger picture, and that most of the projects we were working with were in the service sector. So from healthcare to finance to I remember doing a real estate startup back in the late 90s. So our kind of the initial project was to say, is this service design thing a thing? And I think the core thing was, can we connect the different parts of a service in the design? Can we join it up? Can we make the experience of a service more coherent by working across different parts of the experience that a customer or a user would have, be that a physical space, an interaction with a person, a telephone call, an online experience. So that was kind of where we started. So our initial mission was to sort of get some work, prove that people would buy it. That was our first proof point. The second one was to try and kind of create a bit of a community. We didn't think that there was such a thing as a new design discipline with just one practicing firm of three people in London. And the third thing was to kind of start to engage with design schools, and it be something that you could learn. And to be honest, engaging with design schools is also a great way to test some of our ideas with students as guinea pigs.
It is. It's an interesting way for you to, yeah. I think the ideas, do you allow more ideas to come into the table, when you're working with universities?
Yeah, and so it was a fantastic way to kind of to try things out. You have students who have some safe space to do things. We were able to. So if I give you an example, one of the things we thought, one key aspect of design is experimentation and prototyping and these kind of things. And what does it mean to prototype a service? And so we challenged a group of students. They had to actually stage their service and test it in a kind of live environment with other people. So we had we were working with a project sponsored by Fiat in Italy, and we had two students who'd come up with a kind of technologically augmented hitchhike service where you would register these things exist now actually, but you would register your trip on a mobile device, and you would get a lift. So they were actually out in the streets in Italy with elements of this service, trying to prove it and test it and understand where the experience points were and all that kind of thing. So hard to do that in a commercial setting.
And hard to get these people to just have people who are willing to, who understand the process, right? When you're working with creative students, they are very, I think, aware participants, right? Can I ask you, Ben, just so that people know your history a little bit more? I mean, I think you were with Razorfish. You then were with Oyster Partners, Razorfish in 1996 to 99, Oyster Partners, and then you got into running your own consultancy, right? There are so many professionals in the design industry today that at some point they wonder, how do I start my own consultancy, right?
Right.
And how did you decide to do that? And tell us about, I guess, the experiences that you had in other agencies and how that inspired you, and about how you wanted to create your own agency, you know?
Okay. So my experience of my career is that you go through periods of kind of getting your head down and learning and doing and kind of getting confident with what you do. And then at some point, I mean, maybe this is me, but you sort of think there might be more out there, and I sort of think about, you lift your head up and you kind of look around and you say, what's going on in the world, and what could I do next? So that happened to me a number of times. I have to say, I'm lucky to be here because I studied fine art originally, and I kind of graduated into, with not great career prospects, and I kind of went through a process of realizing I was never going to be an artist and selling my own work, and
Yeah.
a period of sitting kind of miserable in a studio. So I lucked into kind of doing design work because I'd been using a Mac to make some things, and the internet was brand new and no one really knew how to do anything. So I kind of fell into it in that way. But in terms of starting our own agency, I owe a lot to Chris Downs, who's one of my fellow founders, because he had that kind of more entrepreneurial spirit. He was the one who said, let's do this. And then, so the right people, I guess, doing it, I can't imagine doing it solo. I know people do. I can't imagine doing it solo. And that kind of initial spark of kind of enthusiasm. And then a really practical thing that's probably worth pointing out to lots of people is when we did our initial kind of business planning, which is a fancy word for what we did, but we looked at kind of what we would need to make in order to sustain a salary similar to the one we'd been paid. We worked out we only had to sell something like 40% of our days. So, if you have that position of kind of relative, of kind of financial frugality, you can do a lot. We had a lot of space to to learn, and we had a lot of kind of slack in the system in order to, which I think is really essential in those early days. Because the other thing worth mentioning is in the UK, the average duration of a new business is 2.3 years, and then they kind of fold.
Really?
And exactly on 2.3 years, we had no money, and we were calling at everyone we know to say, what have you got? What work have you got? And
that's when you that's when the fire hits, that's when you put your feet to the fire and you go, okay, let's do this. Now we've got to really push ourselves.
Yeah.
And you talked about, you made a comment to doing this in isolation, right? I mean, in reality, we cannot do everything in isolation. This is about collaboration. This is about finding your partners. This is about finding your collaborators, but also your customers, right? Yeah. How did you, when you're in service design and you're reaching out to new corporations to solve their problems, right? I love it, to some degree, Andrea's topic brings up a great point. If you're in a space, in a category, in an industry that has no name yet, that the business world doesn't understand your expertise and your value, how do you begin and broach those conversations, right?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it's like anything that you might be, a project you might be designing on. There needs to be a problem out there to be solved. There needs to be a need, and you need to have something that can actually address that. And I think we did do a good job of saying, I think we identified a genuine problem. I think that services are, and well, are still, but definitely were back then, much poorer experiences than manufactured products. So one of our catchphrases has been, do you love your bank like you love your BMW? And it's just very, very rarely true. And it's interesting to see now some startup banks actually are having that kind of level of, I don't know if in the US, there's a bank here called Monzo, which people queue up to join, queue up online to join, but still. So that was kind of key. I think that message, and we tied it in because also economically services often are kind of less productive, perform less well as well. So I think that was key. And of course, the other thing, which was, I think we talked about, Angela, we had a lot of enthusiasm and we ran around talking to everyone we knew, genuinely designers in large organizations, and kind of trying to get them excited about doing something new called service design. So we had a lot of goodwill and a lot of people willing to kind of, try something with us. So we worked with designers at Sony, at a telco called Orange in the UK, and with the school in Italy, to kind of prove ourselves and create some new. The final thing I say we did was we also would approach, we did some work for free just to get a case study. We worked for a car sharing company, well, Zipcar bought a car sharing company in the UK, and that was just because we needed something and said, look, this is what we can do. And
when you start out, right, you need that proof point, you need that case study, right? Yeah. And exactly. A lot of creatives do that to get started. How do you transition? And, this is some of the things that we teach as well. It's like, but let's share with us, how do you get from that proof point to the next real project that, gets,
I think the first thing you just
gets invested in, right?
Yeah. You keep doing good work and people come back and people refer you. That's the most valuable thing. And that, I think, so the thing that designers aren't ever taught, I don't think, is how to run a business and how to market and sell yourself. And we learned that the hard way on the job. And I think the thing that works best for design is that, doing a good work, getting repeat work from people and getting referrals. That is so much more valuable than anything else you can do. So that is how we built the business, and some probably some bold cold calls to people that paid off.
Can you tell us, we're talking, let's talk about everything that's disrupting us now, right? In your world of service design and looking at all the businesses that are out there, is there some commonality to, COVID, some readjustment of our values, right? Healthcare workers, people on the front lines, the Black Lives Matter, the discussion of injustice. I mean, and I love Andrea's point about letting her users, break the system, because part of this creation that we're doing, it's not just us with our clients, but it's helping them understand their customers as part of that process, part of creating, right? Co-creation with our customers to some degree. What's your advice as a service design consultant to all the businesses out there about how they see their customers, I guess? Like, is there a different relationship that businesses need to have now with their customers, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of our core kind of arguments, is that most businesses find it hard to empathize because of the way they're established, and I think because of the kind of heritage of industrial capital kind of logics, that it's about scale, and if you do things at scale, you end up into efficiencies, and you end up using kind of manufacturing ideas about how to kind of create the business, and that doesn't necessarily translate when both sides, both the customer and the kind of the people delivering the service, are human beings who have feelings and are probably changing faster. I mean, that's another message we often use is the people out there are changing faster than you're keeping up with them in terms of what they expect and things. But I was wondering, I was just sort of, if you were also tying that into these bigger social challenges and environmental.
Well, and I just love that you pointed out not just for any business, not just the outward customers, but we're talking about the people within the organization, right? We, in all the stories that I've heard from people like you, businesses sometimes focus on just their customer, their paying customer, right? Not realizing all the different, let's say, stakeholders that are involved in the process, the people that are in their company, right? So I love that you bring up that fact that we've got to listen to the people that we're collaborating with, right?
So I think just I want to add to that, because I guess there are multiple levels of that humanity question.
Yeah.
And I think design is very comfortable talking about like the user level. Like people find this a pain in the ass kind of level, and we can fix that. And your product or service will be more successful if it's more usable, more desirable, these kind of things. But as I guess that's kind of at one level. And if you go to the much higher level, if you talk about Black Lives Matter or about environmental sustainability, these things are also kind of part of that humanity, and how I think it's a much bigger challenge to bring those into your design work. So for example, the Black Lives Matter protests have obviously made an impact over in the UK, and we've been talking about it as a team, and then what's the response? How do you what do you do as a firm to make sure you're kind of anti-racist, but also what can you do as designers without thinking I can solve all the world's problems, because I don't like design to kind of overstep its space. But we are doing some work with the UK government on a program which is potentially quite controversial. It's around security and things like that. So there's a definite risk of racial bias in the way that these things are designed. So we've been checking in with the team throughout the project that they are making sure they gain insight into what the experience is for minorities, what potential biases are built into that service. And it's an ongoing activity of thinking, how much can I push the client, because it's a big government department, to kind of move in a better direction on these things.
It's interesting you say, how much can I push them, right? Can you guide them to open up their thinking to a certain level? Every interaction that you have with the client, you can't expect them to completely transform their thinking, right? But can you, each of us in our role in the work that we do, can we impact them, to challenge them to change their thinking a little bit, or at least to explore it to begin that, right?
Yeah, and can you back it up with evidence? So can you show what people are actually experiencing, or can you use creativity to show them how things might be different? So you're not just arguing with them. You're really trying to help by showing the insight or showing a potential different way to do things.
And is there showing some level of financial profit to, is there? I know I'm excited for Danielle's talk at the end, but I know that there was a shift in sustainability when you could start to teach businesses the profitability in some respects. The language of business is numbers, right? And if you can teach them this kind of mindset to be more inclusive, does that raise their brand, their ability to connect with their customers?
Yeah, and we definitely do that, or it might be around. In this particular case, some of their practices are actually creating waste for them. If you target the wrong people, you're actually not delivering on your outcomes. You're wasting time and money. So yeah, I think that's important. To try and tell the story in multiple different ways, and to identify what pushes their buttons and how they like to understand things.
I'm going to go ahead and ask, read some questions for you, because I see Gretchen has asked one to an earlier point that you had mentioned. Gretchen Geschedel asked, how do you get those first few customers in launching your business? Can you think back? What was it that you had done?
So it really was and I guess this might be something to consider in the timing. So we had enough of a network of people in interesting roles. So I think our first clients were genuinely design people within internal teams who, we'd either studied with, or they were within an immediate network that we had. I think it's a really critical question. I'm not sure how hard we looked at it beforehand. It was a bit of a leap in the dark. That
trial
was
and
key.
error.
Yeah, and you just have to, challenge your any inhibitions. A lot of designers are relatively kind of introverted, and you just have to put yourself out there and talk to people, and at some point say, so do you think we could do something?
And through the stories that you and I have had, the conversations we've had, and I think you had this a certain level of audacity to reach out to people that most people wouldn't think to approach and have a conversation with, right? And maybe a combination of that and knowing how to ask the right questions, right?
The other great thing I think I kind of mentioned is lean on your design skills. So you don't just reach out, you make something exciting and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this. So we, actually the two other guys had made their master's project together, was a data brokerage concept. And, we'd just approach people and say, hey, this great new idea, you should look at it. And that was really useful for opening doors. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Brian actually wrote, Brian Piper actually has a question, general public, but curious to your, if this is something you can address. He wanted to know, does anyone have any success stories of addressing possible racial biases in their own company? How did these conversations form? I'm just curious to you. I don't know. I mean, and this is a question for all of us, right? Where do we see that in the companies that we're in, or in the company that we've broached, whether you're working with them or not, right? What do you do when you see it? How do you begin that conversation from your standpoint? And to me, I open it up to even all kinds of injustice, right? There's so many types of injustice. I think I feel like we're in a different era that we're coming into now, where there is some, level of being honest about what we're doing and how we're practicing what we're practicing, where we're being fair with everyone to some degree, right?
We're not a big firm. I think a sort of simple answer is I've definitely been on a journey over 20 years of becoming more aware of blind spots. And I guess particularly as a white man, it's certain things that I think the previous speaker was talking about it. The blind spots of an older generation, where you start to think that your achievements are purely based on your merits, but actually, if you look at some of the advantages you have. So I think that's half the battle, and then you can start to challenge some of your decisions.
Ben, can you talk about dominant logic?
Yeah. So I guess this is this part two of the Livework story. We've probably been working for 10 years, and I guess the interesting thing with service design is if you're making a product, you need to understand the machinery, the tooling, and the manufacturing process. If you're making a service, you need to understand the organization that is going to deliver it. And we realized we didn't really understand, large organizations, whether a government department or a corporation. None of us had actually, studied them like business school or worked significantly in them. So we saw some of our projects were being successfully adopted, and some were kind of falling. People were like, we love this, it's really exciting, but they weren't able to take them forward. So we've been on a bit of a journey. Our mission was say, okay, we need to understand the kind of the material of the service and how we interact with the client organization, and how we go from, I guess, painting a picture of an exciting new or improved service from a customer point of view, to working with the people who are actually going to have to change their day jobs or their processes or their technology to get there. And part of that journey has been a colleague of mine, Marzia, has actually undertook a PhD to look into this. So she looked at how firms are adopting design, what challenges there are, and to get to your question. So in management theory, there are dominant logics within different industries and different firms. So, healthcare has a dominant medical logic, construction and engineering logic, those kinds of things. And it's really valuable to understand kind of what makes people tick and what the core thought processes are that become not just within individuals, but sort of systemically within those sectors and organizations. And to understand that design has a different logic, which isn't people's day-to-day practice. So we like to think about it as thinking about cogs, and you've got two different gears that you need to mesh in order to work together. So design needs to think about how it's going to interface with and talk to the gearing of a business.
That is an interesting concept, like as in different cogs. I'm thinking of the toys that my son has, and
exactly
what relations are going to affect the other cog. And I love your comment about dominant logic. To some, it's funny, I've used a similar term, dominant culture, and I've noticed in any company, what makes that company or community, let's say company, because it's easier for us to envision this, what makes that company successful will often be the dominant logic will prevail, right? For however long it's keeping them successful. And sometimes design logic needs to come in to help them see the next phase, right? And how do you pull them through? And it's fascinating that you guys are studying this now, because I think all of us have come to that point where we all have a gift. We all have a method that we can teach our clients how to solve a problem. And you're right, some of those clients will follow through, right? You give them the solution and they say, oh my God, this is great. Let's take this and transform our company and our business. And then you have some clients that say, oh, that sounds good. We'll play with that a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't really adopt it necessarily.
Yeah. And the second half of the story is just understanding, I guess, empathy with your client as human beings within an organization and what it takes to make changes. Is quite key. I think that's the starting point in a way. We've been talking to our team about, the skill set that they have. We do a lot of design research, with users and customers, but the same skills are needed in order to understand the people on the inside and how they, what their concerns are, what their experiences are, and how do you make things easier for them.
I have another question from Margot Jax. Margot, good to see you here. My old colleague from Ross Goldfarb Associates, recruiter in architecture, if anybody ever needs connections there. Margot asks, who would you most like to work with to redesign their programs and processes? Or another way to ask that question, what do you see as most broken that you'd be able to address or would love to address?
This is a great question. So it will be a different answer on different days, but I have been recently obsessing around, I guess, large financial institutions who are still investing in fossil fuels. So the kind of the capitalism behind oil and gas and coal investment, and it's probably one of the gnarliest challenges out there, because our whole system is sort of dependent on these finances, but those finances are being invested unsustainably. So you're starting to see large organizations like BlackRock start to recognize this. And I just think that would be a fantastic challenge. And to the point where, I'm not even sure what design can offer. I'd love to sort of find out, because it's such an esoteric world of big money and investments and systemic kind of problems.
Mm-hmm. I think with any categories, the first stage is really inviting leaders in those spaces to even just to I was going to say pontificate, but to really start to research and just look at the patterns, right? Just exploring it, being open, guiding them to be open to thinking about it in a different way, right?
Yeah, and I'm aware that there are other people who are good at doing that as well. But I think I've been reflecting recently on, I guess, what's the relevance of design with the environmental crisis as a challenge, because to some extent design is part of the problem in that we're part of the system that makes that drives over consumption. So how do we can we still be relevant, and can we be useful? And I guess one point from that is thinking, we might not be the best people to sort of analyze the environmental or financial system, but we might be useful in helping people to imagine what different could look like, and bring the creativity to that part.
I love that. Gregor Mittersink asks, how did your name come about?
Livework?
Yeah, and it's such a great point, because I think now when I think about it, what's going on today, I think your name is beautiful. Right? But tell us what you think, how you came about.
Do you want the truth or the spin?
Wait, all right. Can we have both?
Yeah. I'll start with the. So the line is, that we are all about designing how people live and work. And the truth is that one of my colleagues had already registered the domain, and we couldn't be bothered to spend too long on a naming process, and we thought, that's good, we'll use it. And so,
I love it.
Post-rationalization, I think.
We do. We all have the storytelling piece, right? Yeah. I love that.
But I mean, it came from a good place. He was interested in, I think he'd been to San Francisco and seen all these live-work lofts, and he was like, that's quite cool. That's a nice way to think about living and breaking down the boundary between your work and your life, and not kind of compartmentalizing yourselves.
I think the name came, you guys were again pioneering with the name. I love that, because that's
intuition.
Talk about what we're doing now, right? We are living and working.
Yeah.
Our lives are all meshed together, right? I love this.
Who'd have thought?
Rhonda asks, what are the most important skills for your team right now?
That's a fantastic question too. Keeping it simple, I think, is the, and stick. That seems to be really, really important, I think, and sort of trusting the core principles of what they do. So I see our team in kind of quite complex environments, and I think that a lot of their value is their ability to kind of simplify and make sense, and distill out what's important and what isn't. And also that's kind of what marks them out from other kinds of consultants who seem to complexify things. So that, I think, is a core design quality. It's one of my colleagues said, deceptively easy, surprisingly difficult, or something like that. It looks easy, but it's not.
I love that comment. I feel like this world is so complicated, right? And it just takes so much information and data and science and systems, and can translate all of that for your customer, right?
Yeah. And I think designers are good at it, but need to be confident in that ability.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And I think that is actually, I will tell you that from my perspective, I feel like the leaders in design are the ones who are really good at translating and simplifying and pulling out the summation of things, right? To teach it to the customer that doesn't understand design. Your best customers are the ones who don't understand design. How do you translate that to them? I love it. Max asks, are there any efforts to redesign the airport and flying experience?
So yes, there are. It's an interesting challenge, because I guess it's one that I'm less excited about personally, but I know that I know. So we have colleagues and competitors here in the UK, a firm called Engine, who've done a lot of work. They've definitely been working in Dubai on the airport there. So you'd have to look them up.
Well, we'll have to have those guys up on next time.
Yeah.
I love it. What other things do you think are important for us that you'd love to share, if there's anything else? And you guys, we have a couple of more minutes with Ben. Does anybody have any more questions? Let me know. I have one from Monica.
Yeah.
Monica Danku, by the way, who pivoted from design leadership to product development. Monica asks, Ben, your comment about design being part of the problem with sustainability and our environmental problems. This really resonates with me, but I disagree that the design community can't help to solve this problem. I think the design community is best equipped to help solve this problem. We think outside of the box, we're problem solvers at the core, and there just needs to be a shift in design thinking to focus more on this.
Yeah, I wasn't saying design isn't relevant. I wrote an article recently. It's called Design in the Anthropocene, for using big words, which is kind of along those same lines. It's what are the things that we think are great about design, and how might they be kind of service with that crisis in mind. So I'm not saying design is no longer relevant, but we definitely have to look at ourselves and think.
And I think there was a sound, you said prophesine?
Anthropocene, so the concept that we're living in a new era that's defined, where humanity's impact on the earth is so big that it's kind of geological. Oh,
I love that. You go type that in the Slack for us.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not on the Slack. I'll have to send it out.
Okay. And I think, do we have someone in the, let me see, it looks like someone is raising their hand. Who is Ephraim? Go ahead and can I unmute you, Ephraim, and ask your question?
I unmuted.
Oh, you unmuted. All right, who is Ephraim? Hello? Oh, I think there's a sound issue. Can someone?
They're off. They're off now, Angel.
Oh, okay. All right. Ben, I love, one last thing I wanted to ask you. I mean, I'm in New York, and the United States, I know from my experience, has a higher, as a country, I feel like the businesses in the US have a higher level of understanding of the value of design, whether it's in architecture, whether it's in fashion, whether it's industrial design, user experience, service design. Be curious from your standpoint, because you're in London, you've got clients, and it'd be great to hear about your perspective about, different countries, businesses in different countries, and how they perceive the value of design, or what they're more, amenable to, right? And not only what countries, their perspective of design, but how they see design, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I mainly have I guess a European understanding, and it's quite interesting how that differs, particularly from a service design point of view. So we've seen, very high interest and kind of adoption in the Nordic countries, and so we've worked in Norway for a long time, and just for example, the Norwegian Department for Health actually requires there be service design contributions to any major change projects, because they see that need. Whereas you go to Italy, and because they have such a kind of strong fashion and manufacturing design kind of understanding, service design confuses the hell out of people down there quite a lot.
Design is like an elephant, right? To some people it's the nose, some people it's the tail, some people it's the trunk.
Exactly. And in Germany, I think there's a more technology focused application of design still, which is great. Whereas in the UK, I think service design has probably been the most successful in government. So there's a group within the UK government called Government Digital Services who have a whole kind of guidance and standards around service design, and have kind of promoted it widely across government.
That is fascinating. Yeah. Is that almost in some degree your concept of dominant logic, where in, let's say, the country of Italy, if their first exposure to design is fashion and aesthetic, that it's harder for them to reframe what design's impact can be, and that it can be used on a user experience level or service design level?
Yeah, it could be.
Right?
Yeah.
So you guys, for all of you out there, if you guys have connections to government, reach out and start solving those problems, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Start broaching those topics, right? And think about their preconceived notions. you know, what's their historical understanding of what design can do? And maybe it's time to reframe for them what design's capable of, right? I love that.
Nice summary, Angela.
What?
Great summary, thank you.
I love that. Ben, I love the space that you are in, service design, pioneering. There's so many businesses today, if anything, right, that need your help in re-seeing their business, understanding their customer. And I love your point of even reminding them to think about the people that are in their teams, right, their collaborators, and being mindful of everyone. Is there any final parting remarks that you have for me? And let me just, while you're doing that, let me check to see if we have any more questions. Gretchen says she's on the advisory board of Anthropocene Design out in New York City. Okay.
Oh, wow.
I have to practice saying that.
Yeah, it's tricky.
I love that. I love that word. Okay.
Cool. I'll have to make connections with Gretchen.
Yes, you will on Slack.
Great. Okay.
Thank you. Any other final questions from anybody? And be curious to see, yeah, how many people are, you know, in London. Just let us know on the Slack channel also where you guys are located, right? Let's see how far this community goes. Ben, would you be open to some questions? I know actually we got a comment, someone was not going to be able to make your talk, and I forgot to mention this. They wanted to reach out to you after. Can they connect with you on the Slack channel afterwards with any questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And, all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks so much for joining us.